My name is Michael Beck with Trade Secure, and I'm joined by Carl Voka from Merlin Intelligence Technologies, and he is the expert on the technology, and so hopefully can answer all of your difficult questions here this morning. First, a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the opportunity for using digital experts in the trade compliance space, namely in the screening and risk management space. Over the past 2 years, Trade Secure has been working with Merlin Intelligence Technology to digitize experts in the export control and sanctions space. We've been working both with industry clients, or hoping to work with industry clients, I should say, as well as with government clients. And today we're going to present some of the cases from both industry and government and how digital experts can support enhanced screening and compliance functions. First, just a little bit about our company, Trade Secure. I'm the vice president and one of the founders. We are a firm that's focused on export controls and sanctions globally. So we're a bit different from other consultancies that focus on U.S. export control and sanctions compliance, in that we track what's going on internationally. We have a database, an online database that some of the conference participants use called Accelerator, and we track export controls in 80 plus countries, sanctions, customs laws, and regulations. And so some of you on this call, I believe, are subscribers to that service. In addition to that, we do internal compliance program development, customized training, global export control research, and conduct external audits for companies with a global footprint. So today, again, we're going to be focused mainly on the use of Merlin's technology to address screening issues. And I don't think that there's anyone in this audience today or online that doesn't know about some of the pitfalls, as well as, I guess, the rewards as a result of new screening technology. OFAC recently was fined $135,000 for violations that resulted from shortcomings in their screening process. They had, in fact, accepted orders from persons in Crimea, Iran, Syria, and processed orders to persons on the SDN list. And the Amazon screening system failed to analyze transaction and customer data relevant to compliance. For example, on the Crimea thing, it didn't recognize Crimea spelled with the letter K. Also, the automated system failed to flag names that were even correctly spelled. Apple, likewise, was fined $500,000 for export control and sanctions violations. One of their clients, a Slovenian company, was added to the SDN list after they entered an agreement with them. And their system would have flagged it, but it failed to match the names due to lower and uppercase letters that were coded in the system. And I think, we think of Amazon and Apple, these two giant companies, should have the most sophisticated screening systems, but those systems only work well if you have a team of humans and experts behind them to implement and monitor those systems. And this really points to the need for expertise within an organization. Many of you are those experts. Again, another challenge that many of you are well versed in, probably even more versed in it than I am, is this challenge of false positives. Many times, compliance managers and their teams are spending inordinate amounts of time investigating and clearing transactions. For large corporations, this can be a real onerous task. For banks that clear thousands of transactions a day, this can create a real logjam. And this has been, again, something that many of those in the compliance space have been struggling with, in spite of enhancements to existing automated that are out there. One kind of case that I'm going to ask Carl to speak to is in this banking space here. Carl has worked with a bank in South Africa who has dealt with sanctions, pet screening challenges, and this issue of a system flagging transactions and then having to clear thousands of them. Fortunately, they turned to Merlin, and I believe that Merlin was able to help them by digitizing experts within their organization to clear transactions. So, Carl, could you say just a word about the bank case?
Sure, thank you. So, essentially, we're going to be sharing the slide deck, so I won't work through the entire slide with you, but the challenge that the bank had was that they had deployed different AI systems doing transaction monitoring within their high risk client environment. And these systems would invariably generate a flag, and the flag needs to be assessed by a human expert. So even in these sort of high technology environments, you still have uncertainty that creeps into a process. So where there's uncertainty, there's a need for a judgment call by an expert. So the philosophy behind our technology really is in leveraging this very scarce resource of expertise. So essentially our approach, or their approach, was that they had a challenge where they had to analyze 600,000 alerts that actually arrived overnight. And when you look at their staff complement, they had essentially eight experts who could look at these alerts and then either clear them or escalate them. And when we went in and looked at the capacity of these individuals, they had the capacity of around 50 odd transactions per day. So an expert could look at a transaction and then clear it, but they could only look at around 50 per day. So obviously looking at a workload of around 600,000, it's, it was worked out that it would take them around 5 years odd to clear those alerts. Within the banking space, just to give you a sense of how big this problem really is, some of the tier one banks in North America, they've got staff components of 3,000 odd people who are clearing alerts. And again, the challenge with traditional AI is that you still have some uncertainty, and at points or at sort of different points within a transaction, you still refer to an expert to make that final judgment call. What we've done with our technology is we've pointed AI not to learn from data, but rather to learn from our human experts. So our experts who have got an intuition around these judgment calls. So our approach in this regard was, rather than hiring more people to try and solve this challenge, we took their top assessors and processed them through our AI, where our artificial intelligence essentially learned from them, essentially cloned their decision-making capability, and then operationalized this. So the project ran for around 3 months, and the 3 months was really us working through training our AI to mimic or clone these experts. And the capability of the solution is that it's actually deployed now, and we've got a couple of these deployments around the world now. But within this context, it's clearing an alert in around 2 seconds, start to finish. Obviously, computationally, you can scale that to a real-time event. The solution for them really allowed them, as an alert arrives, as these spikes arrive, they can address them pretty much in a real-time manner. So the sort of takeaway, what Mike mentioned earlier, is the concept of a digital expert. The takeaway is that AI is being used to learn to be that digital expert. So the efficiency around the technology is really around removing that bottleneck around access to those experts. And I'll speak a bit later about where this technology is going globally as well. Mike, I think that's a good sort of
Thank you, Carl. So another challenge for companies and for governments alike is the more complex kind of due diligence. Is looking beyond list screening and recognizing that the bad guys out there, the DPRK, the Iranians and others, they're not ordering directly in many cases from Western companies and global companies. They're using front companies and free trade zones and complex shipping routes. A number of different methods to avoid detection, and that's where kind of the expertise is also needed within organizations to sniff out requests and transactions that just are not right. That's not something a typical automated screening system can address. Of course, BIS issues its know your customer guidelines. And this kind of guidance requires an expert's ability to identify abnormal aspects of a transaction. It could be a suspicious email, an unusual shipping request. And again, this requires expertise that really can't be automated, if you will. And to kind of conclude this point, automated screening is incredibly useful. The tools are becoming more sophisticated, but we really still need human insight and judgment to make decisions. These new systems and automated risk screening systems do not negate the need for human decision making in the course of managing risks. Ultimately, they generate warnings or flags that have to be adjudicated and dealt with by a person. And again, this can create a bottleneck. And our experience has been that some systems, both being used by government and
Mr. Beck, it seems
compliance teams to address.
Oh, you're back
okay.
On. Can you hear us?
Is everything okay?
We seem to have lost you for a moment there, but it seems that you're back online.
Okay, good. In the case of screening systems, RPA and machine learning can, of course, automate key elements of the process. They can flag transactions, but oftentimes there's a great deal of uncertainty that requires, again, human intervention in order to take a decision. Perhaps you need more information about the route, the destination, the terms of sale, the end user in order to take a decision. Again, to deal with this uncertainty, we need human expertise. So what we are trying to do with Merlin is to digitize or clone that expertise or individuals to create a panel of digital experts that could make more consistent, reliable, and efficient decisions. So this is exactly what we are trying to do at TradeSecure with Merlin's technology, which goes by the acronym TOM, or Tacit Object Modeler. speak to this in more detail later. It's not an expert system. It's not machine learning like we talked about before. In some ways, it's very simple. In other ways, it's complex. The first task in using the technology is to identify the experts either in our organization or in other organizations, perhaps your organization, that have the expert knowledge that you want to clone, if you will. The second step is for them to work with Merlin and our team to define the decision's parameters. Perhaps it's, again, this decision of whether to hold a transaction or to release it, even after it's perhaps been flagged by an automated risk screening system. The next step is to teach that digital expert how you, as an expert, makes decisions. And this is done through a simple question-answer process on the variables that the
Can you hear us? So it seems that we have lost you once more. Mr. Beck, can you hear us?
It's Carl again. I think Mike might dial in. So in the interim, I'll just talk through what's happening on this on the screen. Essentially, what's happening sort of through the training process, because obviously the foundations of the technology are based on the methodology of learning from an expert. And the way that this technology works is that it allows you to, it places the expert within a simulation environment and monitors the way the expert responds to get to that heuristic or rule that the expert is using. So expertise, is something that's subconscious. So an expert struggles to explain a rule, and really what this technology, what the TOM technology does, is that it learns the rule from, as I said, from observing the way the expert responds to different environments and scenarios. And the process can take as little as half an hour to an hour to actually uncover that rule, which it then encapsulates within an AI artifact. Mike, are you back?
I am back now. I turned my video off in hopes that will help a bit.
So Mike, I've got better probably connectivity here in Africa than what you have in North America, which is shameful, I suppose.
Yes, that's too bad. All right, I'm going to go back and pick up where we left off here. We are using TOM technology or Merlin's technology to create digital virtual experts that can deal with the screening issue. And one of the first models that we developed is designed to screen individuals using the consolidated screening list. This is, of course, all fed through an API, and we refer to this list-based screening as first-order screening. Again, this is a bit different from existing screening systems which create rules that, provide rules. In this case, the expert is establishing the rules that are appropriate for their company and other variables that they may consider to be important. So this, in essence, what you see here is kind of a flow chart showing where the digital expert would reside in the screening process. The next kind of screening or digital expert that we're seeking to introduce into the screening process is a digital expert that will deal with the red flag type of screening that is proposed by BIS and other export control bodies. And this would consider risk and consider other types of diversion risk, such as the stated end use being inconsistent with the product. You know, is the end user or customer making an unusual request, which again, the expert can define, and other red flag variables. In this case, the user would probably have to enter manually the information to get the decision that the expert may take. So this is something that we're in the process of building out for industry, and is a bit more complex, and in some cases may require an expert within the company or the sector to intervene, because I think the red flags for one industry or one company may not apply to all. Some are universal and can be automated. Others are universalized rather, and others cannot and would be case dependent. One area where we are actually doing this second order type of screening is in the government space. You know, selectivity systems or targeting systems that are used by customs organizations are, again, just like industry, automated restricted party screening systems. And oftentimes customs are dealing with the same issues of false positives that require adjudication by a customs official or a licensing official. So one thing that we're doing right now with some support from the World Customs Organizations, we're doing a pilot project in the Philippines, and we're actually helping them address a particular problem with their targeting or selectivity system. Currently, the selectivity system or the targeting system used by Philippines Customs flags, for example, any transaction where the HS code matches an export control classification number. And as many of you may know, ECCN numbers are not perfectly correlated with HS. So just because you have that match does not necessarily mean that you are dealing with a dual use item. Nonetheless, when that happens, their selectivity system flags it, the transaction is held, and then it is referred to the licensing agency. This has and will create a bottleneck that they recognize, because licensing agencies have 8 to 5 working hours, whereas the trade and customs organization is working around the clock and on weekends and holidays. So they don't want a situation where customs is having to hold up and export a transaction while they wait for someone from the licensing agency to intervene. And this is what we're doing, is attempting to insert a digital expert in that process so that customs can quickly release transactions that are low risk and only hold those transactions that might threaten national security or international security and pose a real risk. This diagram here reflects crudely the customs process for exports in the Philippines and shows where we are attempting to insert that digital expert. Again, the decision to be made is, should customs hold or release a transaction that has been flagged by customs because they're suspicious that it may be a strategic item, or because the transaction has been flagged by the selectivity system as being high risk. this is, and I know that many of you can't see the text here. My colleague, Dr. Jones, and I have created a digital virtual expert to support this decision by Customs in Philippines as to whether or not to hold or release a shipment that has been flagged because of that correlation. The decision model considers diversion risk indicators such as the history of the shipper, the export control system of the destination country, whether it's developed or not, whether the final destination of the goods is a free trade zone, whether the freight forwarding firm is listed as the final destination, and other risk indicators that go into our expert model. I should note that the licensing agency in the Philippines is also using Merlin's technology to create their own digital experts, not just using ours, but using Merlin's technology to create experts that will support this process as well. So customs organizations or businesses can use a panel of experts or can use one expert in order to address a situation. This is a wireframe of the interface that a customs organization in the Philippines would see. So you can imagine the selectivity system flagging a transaction, customs having to say, okay, we've got to hold this for the licensing agency. But in this case, they can simply consult with the digital expert that we've created for the licensing agency or ones that they've created. The customs officer would enter manually in most cases, or it could be fed through APIs, responses to these variables that we as experts or experts at the licensing agency need in order to take a decision. So this would take a matter of 10 minutes maybe at the most. They would fill this out, they would submit it, and they would get a decision from the digital expert as to whether or not the transaction should be held or can be released. And again, this addresses the problem that the customs organizations have in the Philippines and in other countries where they don't want to hold up trade unnecessarily. This decision, it's important to note, is the same decision that they would get if they were to call Dr. Jones or I in the middle of the evening to get a decision on whether or not a flagged transaction can be released or should be held for further investigation. Again, I should note that a panel of digital experts can also determine whether the shipment can be held, or it can be one individual that a customs organization wants to empower or a business would want to empower to take key decisions. So that's a little bit about both the industry applications for this technology, as well as some of the government applications that we are exploring with customs organizations and licensing organizations in Asia and around the world. I'm going to now turn the floor over to Carl, who has a more stable internet, to talk about the platform that they are creating that would allow you and your organizations to access our digital experts, or with our help to create your own digital experts from your organizations to take key decisions in trade compliance, including those in sanctions and export control or other areas of trade compliance that would address bottlenecks in your organization or other challenges that you're facing. So Carl, could you talk a bit about the vision of the AI Employment Agency?
Sure, thanks, Mike. Mike, if you can go to the next slide, and then I'll sort of introduce what we've built. So, essentially the vision or dream is to move expertise anywhere around the world at any time. So the example that Mike mentioned in the Philippines is a great example, because essentially you can take the expertise of a CBP or Homeland Security agent and make them available anywhere around the world. So in the past, you would probably send these very important scarce resources, put them on a plane and go and get them to train someone. But with AI, what you can do is, following the methodology that we've explored this afternoon, you can digitize this expertise and actually transport it not only to do training, but actually to do service at a transactional level around the world. At the moment, we are dealing with some of the large European banks, and one in particular is actually exploring using the concept of digital expertise to build digital experts out of their risk team and make this risk team virtually available, anywhere around the world. Any sort of anything from a third world bank through to supporting first world banks anywhere around the world. So this platform is running. There's limited access to it at the moment. There's some fairly sensitive content, but in the coming weeks, we're going to be opening it up for sort of regular consumer use. But the concept is termed the AI Employment Agency. So the thinking is to create an employment agency or recruitment agency where you can actually go in and hire expertise from different industries. And then employ that expertise literally within a couple of hours or a couple of days. So the platform has been designed to allow, as Mike mentioned, allow people to create their digital twins or virtual experts, digital experts, and then to make these available around the world. You can imagine, and some of the areas that we're operating in are within the social environments, within medical type environments, financial service type environments, and then obviously sort of the risk, the compliance trade type environments as well. What you're looking at the moment is we've selected expertise within North America, and these are people that have developed expertise that you can essentially hire. So Mike, if you click, sort of go to the next slide, we've selected a lady called Anna Phillips, and you can actually see the pedigree of Anna Phillips and also the virtual experts that have been cloned around Anna Phillips's capabilities. Now, you would have the ability to manually engage, so to manually test these models. So you can get into a chatbot environment where you'll the AI will ask you different questions, and based on your inputs, it will respond, and you can look at the decisioning of the virtual Anna. Or what you can do is you can employ, by simply clicking on the employ button, you can actually employ Anna into your organization. Mike, if you click on the next screen, we've also created connections into sort of the main cloud providers, so the Google, Amazon, Microsofts of the world, where most of the organizations, including governments, have got some form of cloud service provider with one of these three main providers. And immediately that virtual expert, digital twin, digital expert is employed and dropped into your environment where you can deploy them at a transactional level. Now, what's possible with this approach is and that's the dream of this technology and of Merlin, is for a better, less risky world by making expertise available anywhere, anytime. And the key is an operational level. So using AI to virtualize expertise allows us to operationalize expertise at a real-time transactional environment, or within a real-time transactional environment. And really what that means is your experts can look at transactions versus dealing with alerts or dealing with exceptions. At the moment, when you look at a scarce resource of expertise, you have the challenge where the expert can only do so much. The example that we spoke about earlier within the banking space, they have a limitation. You know, they need to be fed, they're expensive, they go to sleep at night. But that's why they don't do service at an operational level. With this approach, you can actually operationalize them. An example that I can also use, which is not within the compliance space, but is within the medical environment. We're currently looking at a project within North America in admissions, hospital admissions. Now, imagine an admissions capability where you've got the top medical thinkers, clinicians who are thinking about admissions and protocols and the like, versus simplistic rules. So the approach, and again, you know, today is really just to show you what's possible with this kind of approach. The approach really that this allows you to employ is really scaling that expertise, and then also obviously the marketplace around that, marketplace commercial opportunities around that.